This is the His and Her Money Show, where we talk about managing money, marriage, and everything in between. Now, here are your hosts, Talaat and Tai McNeely.
Welcome back to another edition of the His and Her Money Show, brought to you by hisandhermoney.com. Today's episode, we're tackling marriage. We have some special guests on the line by the name of Jackie and Stefana Bledsoe from JackieBledsoe.com. And they have some amazing content, a curriculum that they developed, and it is called the 7 Rings of Marriage.
That's right. They gave so many tips and helpful information in regards to the 7 rings that each marriage will encounter.
And believe it or not, we all go through it. And the way they broke it down, phenomenal. You definitely want to tune in right now.
That's right.
On the line today, we have a great special duo that's joining us today to help out marriages. We're joined by Jackie and Stefana Bledsoe from JackieBledsoe.com.
Hi, guys. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Awesome. Now, you guys have this great curriculum called the 7 Rings of Marriage, which is an intriguing title, and the content is even more awesome. But before we get into what that's all about, can you guys give us a little background on yourselves and let our audience know what you guys are all about?
Definitely. We've been married 13 years. It'll be 14 this June. We have 3 wonderful kiddos, 3 more JBs. They all have my initials. The oldest 14 with the youngest being 5. And we are very, very passionate about marriage. And that passion has come from seeing several friends not make it in marriage and just seeing the challenges that marriages face today and how it's really almost under attack. And it's just something that God has placed in us to help, 1, to grow our marriage first and foremost, but 2, to be a blessing to other marriages as well.
Now, you guys have been at this for a while trying to help marriages out. What have you seen has been the number one marriage destroyer?
I would say it's communication. That has been one of our biggest challenges, is just a breakdown in a communication, because that leads to so many other things. If you're not communicating, you can't resolve the problems. You can't even express the problems. So when you're not able to communicate with your spouse on a regular basis, and also in a way that is respectful and loving, then you can start to see the breakdown happen.
So what would you say has been the number one key to your marriage being successful these last 13 years?
I would say the main thing would be our relationship with the Lord. So as we've come into difficult points in our relationship, it's always been both of us willing to turn back to Him and to try to go back to home base, I guess, kind of, and start again.
Yeah, definitely. That's our foundation. It's just our relationship in Christ. And we've said many times before, I don't see how couples make it without that foundation. Marriage is so hard in itself to not to have that home base, like she said, that thing that you know both of you can stand on. And if you feel too weak to stand on it, you know that your spouse is standing on it. That is definitely something that has been our rock.
You know, I got to agree with you, Jackie. I wonder, I almost kind of feel sorry for marriages out there who aren't founded on Jesus Christ, because like you just said, marriage is hard. It's work. It takes effort. And man, you could get to a point to where you could call it quits if you don't have that foundation, that source to draw strength from, So, man, it's like it is super important for marriage to be in its original what it was founded on, which was a relationship with Christ.
I agree. It reflects our relationship with Him as well, the way we interact with our wife. So it is the perfect relation. He created a perfect relationship to us, but we sometimes pervert it and don't do things that in the way that He set them up.
We first came across you guys because of a great article that we read called The 7 Rings of Marriage, and it caught my eye just from the title. And when we read it, we was like, oh man, we gotta call Jackie. We gotta get him on the show. So tell us, what is the 7 Rings of Marriage all about?
The 7 Rings of Marriage. I'll tell you from how I got started. It was actually, one time I was driving home alone. I was listening to a sermon. I don't remember who was preaching, but the pastor was preaching about something else, but he kind of threw in something about 4 rings of marriage. And it was kind of a side note, a footnote to the sermon. And he went through a couple of them and it intrigued me. So I don't know how long it was after that. A few weeks later, maybe I was sitting down to write, and I asked, and it's funny because anytime I've invited Stefana to help me create from the start a post, it usually is one of the best posts or most well-received posts that I've created. So sat down with her and asked, what are the different stages that we've gone through our marriage? And so we kind of sat and talked back and forth and came up with that. And as we laid it out, it just made sense, and it just flowed from the very first ring all the way to the seventh ring. And what we learned was it's something that probably many other couples have experienced as well. And then when we did release that, when we published it, we found out the exact thing. Many couples have experienced the seven rings, and it just hit home when you hear them.
Can you walk us through it? What's the first one?
The first ring is the engagement ring. And so we kind of describe that ring as the bliss and the excitement, and you see no wrong in your mate type of beginning in the relationship.
Yeah, it's also that we mentioned it earlier, that foundation that we're setting. That's the time when you want to lay the proper foundation that is going to help your marriage to stand through all the different rings and through all the stuff that goes through. And like you said, Talaat, marriage is hard. So without that foundation, you start to break down. The second ring is the wedding ring. And, that continues to what Stefana said, is that's that excitement. That's that happily ever after. That's the dream that we all dream marriage is supposed to be like, and that also signifies our commitment, because in the engagement ring, you don't have to go through and commit, that can end. But once we commit and say, I do, then we're in. And that's what the wedding ring is about. And then the next ring, I'll let Stefana talk about that. The discover ring. She has a good story about discovering is basically when you get married and you're starting to live with your spouse and you see them every day, you find some stuff that you're like, we might not be married had I known that. But not only do you find out stuff about them, but I'll let Stefana fill this one in.
Yeah, I think that it's not only realizing that the socks may not make it to the basket or the toothpaste is not the way you like it to be, but there's also some things that you discover about yourself that you didn't have to look at when you were single. You didn't have to realize your own flaws in the areas that you were selfish in. So it's just as much about discovering how you can impact this relationship positively as it is recognizing in your spouse some things that you're going to have to grow and live with.
Yeah, we see the ugly in me a lot more than we see the challenges in our spouse. And then after the discovery, and after you start seeing things in a new light, and after you start finding out some stuff, and you see some good stuff as well, but then you go into the persevering, and that is the part that a lot of couples don't make it. That ends a lot of marriages because they've now seen their spouse in a way that wasn't as pleasing as what they saw before. And now they go through hard times. And sometimes those hard times aren't just from discovering. Sometimes life itself brings that point where you have to persevere. I mean, for those of us that have kids, you got to persevere a little bit.
We got a lot of kids.
So we
definitely persevering over here.
You are persevering.
3 is a lot in 2015.
And another thing too, and your story fits this so well, is the financial piece. You guys, your story is one of you was great with finances, the other was not so great. So you guys have experienced that, and that was a challenge that you had to get through that could have ended your marriage. Many couples, finances is one of the biggest pieces that ends marriages, so you got to persevere through that. So there's many different things, but it's basically that point of pushing through and making sure that we run the race and we finish the race. We're not quitting, we're not stopping halfway through, we ain't taking time out and going and sitting in each other's corners. We're going to go through it together. So that's the persevering. Then after that, some stuff gets broken. So when it gets broken, you got to put pieces back together, and that's the restoring. When you're like, okay, I said some stuff. Somebody may have done some stuff. We've interviewed couples on our show that have had affairs, and they've started to restore and put the pieces back together. So that could go from something as small as, you just don't like the person that you married to like you used to, and you had to persevere through that, or something that's been done in the marriage that now has to be put back together. The restoring it has to happen to continue to grow and get to the next spot. Yeah. So what did we cover? We covered the engagement ring.
Yes.
Yep.
We covered the wedding ring.
Yep.
Covered discovering.
Yep.
Yes.
Persevering.
Yep.
Restoring.
Yes.
Now we get to the good stuff. Now we're at the prospering. And that's what we all seen and we all hope for in the engagement ring and also in the wedding ring. You've seen the happily ever after. And this is where you now have gone through some stuff. So your marriage can handle it. Your spouse has got your back and you got her back. And you guys are in it together. And now you're experiencing some things in marriage that you never experienced before or you never even thought. This is the part where I say marriage is better than I expected. There's things that you see your spouse and the way you've connected. You still argue, you still fight, you still have some issues going on, but that you can persevere through them. That if something gets messed up, something gets broken, you put it back together, and now you're experiencing that good stuff. And that's from all levels. That's financial, that's relational, that's physical, spiritual, emotional, all those areas. So that's the prospering. And last is the mentoring. And, that's the ring that we're starting to walk in now. I guess we've been walking it now for about a year or so. But after you've gone through all that, it's almost a crime not to share it with other couples. because you know what you went through and how you almost didn't make it. And you can see some other couples that maybe in that season that you were in as well, or wearing one of those rings that you were wearing previously that are so hard. Well, now it's the time to start to share your lessons that you've learned, your experiences, so that they too can make it through all the rings and they can have the lasting and they can have the fulfilling marriage that they hope for and we all hope for when we say I do.
You know, you're right. And I think the problem is, I think a lot of people having their idea in their head that they're going to go from engagement ring to wedding ring to prosper ring and forget all the other stuff in between. And I think that's where a lot of marriages get caught up, is in the discovering and then whether or not they're going to go through persevering and restoring. I think that's the problem there, is the false idea of what the journey of marriage really is.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It's hard. And we got to go through that. I say you, like you said, you can't go from wedding ring straight to prospering. You have to go through those things. That's the development process. And that's the thing, you know, we've gone through plenty of things, financial and other, and that's the thing that brings you closer together, is going through those stages.
Well, that sounds like a journey that every married couple would love to make it through, but not all do. So how do we get there practically? What are some of the things that we can do together to get there?
I think from the beginning in marriage, if you realize that you're both two individuals coming into a relationship together that have your own ideas about, you first recognize that and then be willing to set that aside, completely put it away, and then seek to know what your marriage together is going to look like.
We all come in with different ideals on how marriage should be. We got to forget that, you know, whether it be from our parents who maybe had a successful marriage or they didn't, or somebody else, you know, the things that or what we see on TV. We might think that's how it is. We got to forget all that. And then we got to go back and, like we mentioned earlier, set that foundation. And that foundation is based on biblical principles on marriage, the way God set it up originally. That's what we got after we got married. Unfortunately, we didn't do the premarital counseling like we tell couples to now, but we were fortunate enough to get it early in marriage and reset our thoughts and our ideas of what marriage should be.
If couples really are dedicated to this, you know, you got two parties that are on board and they're with it, I can kind of see them grasping on to the concept. But what do you do when you have one spouse that's on board and hears your advice and said, yeah, this is exactly what my marriage needs, but maybe they have kind of a reluctant spouse that they're working with?
That's a good question. Really, really good question. I recently learned something from a friend of mine who went through a journey like you guys did, where they paid off debt, and the husband was on board with paying off debt, but the wife was not initially. And his way of getting her on board was something that I was like, man, that's good stuff right there. And basically what he did was he first led with his actions. So he didn't beat her over the head. He didn't, condemn her for spending when she shouldn't have spent, or, going and getting a coffee a day, whatever it may have been. He just took those basic steps and took the first step and took the action. But he also, he didn't just shut her out. He offered to include her. He would give her suggestions on, hey, here's a good book to read that could help with our finances, or here's this. He shared things, but if she didn't utilize those things, he didn't beat her up over it. He just led by the example that he was setting. He stopped spending. And over time, if one spouse is doing that and the other spouse is not, you're eventually going to come around, or, unfortunately, you might go the other way. But that is the best example that I've seen of it, is first take that first step yourself, lead by example, and be patient with your spouse.
I would add to that, just being prayerful for your spouse. I think that goes beyond anything that we can do in the natural, is just to take it to God and ask for his help with that, in love, to guide that person down the correct path.
Another tip that you guys give is the importance of committing to marriage development. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. Anybody that's worked a job or a corporate company or corporate office knows that they stress professional development. If you search online real quick and go to personal development, there's a ton of stuff out there. We are big on pushing personal and professional development, but not big on pushing marriage development. So if corporate America knows that in order for you to be the best employee that you can be for that company, that you need some professional development, then there's something also that should be said about doing the same with marriage. So basically, for us to get the skills, to get the understanding, to get all the things that we need to do to be successful in that area, we need to develop, read books, we need to study, we need to connect with other people who are doing the same thing. And that's the big thing, marriage development. I mean, right after you forget what marriage is about, you got to start figuring out what it is about. When you forget what you thought it was about, now you got to get the right pieces in there. And that comes from marriage development.
After you're working on the marriage piece, you guys also talk about how you have to kind of be careful of who's in your circle, right?
That's huge. I think in the beginning, both Jackie and I had single friends. We just weren't surrounded by couples that were walking the way that we were striving to go. And that was hard, to cut off relationships with people that were friends for a long time, but recognizing that that wasn't healthy for the direction that we were going in our marriage.
Yeah, I got to share the story. we had some friends very, very close to us. And just as far as like being in the right circles and having the right company, you want people that are also for marriage, like you are for marriage, and for you and your spouse. So one time we had a disagreement. I went out, did something dumb, spent some money I wasn't supposed to spend, large amount of money, and I left for a while.
We had been talking about this PlayStation. This PlayStation had been on the table.
I used to play games back in the day, Tyler. I used to be a little gamer.
All right. Got caught up.
So I went and bought a PlayStation.
Man.
But check it out. I bought the PlayStation and left it in the trunk because I was scared of bringing it in the house.
Oh, no. You a grown man, Jackie.
No, sir. So I did not bring it in. So anyway, long story short, somehow or rather, I left and went somewhere. It was like, I'm Gary Ryder. I'm not coming back for whatever I was not going to come back for. So finally, I come back home and I open the door and I see one of my partners sitting in our living room with my basketball shorts on. Like, what is he doing here? So basically, him and his wife have found out we was having issues. They came over, camped out, spending the night. So that's the first thing I see when I walk in there. So immediately, he's trying to calm me down because I'm mad. Now I'm mad because I see him just lounging in the crib with my stuff on. So, but the moral of the story is those were friends that were close to us. They cared about us and they cared about our marriage. They drove probably 45 minutes to come and stay with us to prevent me from doing something stupid and prevent us from both doing something stupid when I came back home. So that's important. You might, when you first get married, you might have a circle of friends that when something goes down in your marriage, they like, okay, let's go over here and let's do this. That was not the type of friends that we finally got to. So, and that's why it's important to watch the circle that you keep.
So that kind of aligns with the last ring of marriage, which is mentoring, right? Where you had your friends kind of intervene at a touchy time. I mean, they went so far as say, we going to stay tonight till this thing gets right. And I think we need more of that, don't we? Don't we need more couples? There's no perfect marriage, but why aren't more couples helping other couples?
It's uncomfortable to sometimes call your friend out on something that's not right. And so putting that aside and being bold enough to say, look, I love you and I love y'all and we're in it with you. That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah, and we have to be transparent about that. And that is part of our passion behind marriage is we've had some friends close to us that marriages didn't make it. And some of those situations, we feel like they were reaching out and we didn't do enough to help kind of put it like, okay, that's their business. We didn't want to get in their business, whatever it was. But it led to divorce. It led to separation. It led to infidelity. In hindsight, look back, it's like, man, they were actually reaching out to us, and we're talking family members. We're talking very, very close friends. And that was something that's like, that hurt. But also, it showed us what God was doing because people were looking at our marriage in a different light than we looked at. So we realized at that point that marriage was bigger than just us. Right. I had a friend that said, the day you get divorced is the day I lose faith in marriage. And that just blew me. I was like, what?
So it's all dependent on you making it.
Right.
I mean, no pressure though.
Right. So, but it was that was just, so profound to say that because at the time we didn't realize, we were, you know how it is in your house. You got all your own struggles yourself. You like, if he's seen inside these four walls, you might think that, okay, you about to lose faith in marriage because we almost didn't make it. But that is one of the first things that helped me and us realize that God was doing something in our marriage and in our lives that he wanted to use us to help bless marriages and to help bless families.
This is great information. So now you guys have actually designed an entire curriculum around the 7 rings of marriage.
Yep, we are working on that right now. We've actually partnered with Lifeway Christian Resources and B&H Publishing, which is part of Lifeway. The 7 Rings of Marriage book will be written and it'll be published early next year in February. Awesome. And then in addition to that, we are also working on a curriculum based on the 7 Rings of Marriage as well. So it's not completely done. We're actually in the middle of working on it, manuscripts and stuff like that. So it'll be a project that we finish out this year. And we're also interviewing other couples similar to what you guys are doing right now. So we can get not just our insight, but other couples' insight too that have lasting and fulfilling marriages. So we're excited about it. And And
Yes.
We're excited too, and we're going to blast it out all over the web as soon as it goes live, because we want to see marriages make it. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in addition to learning more about the 7 rings of marriage, you all teach that there is something that couples can do like right now, like as soon as the show is over with, right? That would be the ultimate game changer for their marriage. What's that?
Absolutely. That would be prayer. That's huge for us. And we're not perfect. We don't do it the way that we would like to do it every single day, but we definitely notice a difference in the way that our day and the way that we interact and just how we feel about one another when we pray together. So if we start our day out together, it doesn't have to be 20, 30 minutes. If it's 5 minutes that we stop and that we come together and talk to the Lord, is huge.
Yeah, it is the ultimate game changer. I mean, when you are going before the Lord with your wife or with your husband, there's a transparency that happens that you can't get anywhere else. So, whatever you're coming into that prayer session with, you're able to get through that. So you see your wife being totally transparent with God and then with you. And it's something, for me, it's beautiful to see her like that. And at the same time, you can't walk. It's very hard. You might try to force it, but you can't walk away from praying together and being that transparent with your wife and with God and still be looking at each other, talking crazy, side-eyeing and all that type of stuff. So it just breaks down the barriers and just gives you that intimate connection that you can't get any other way.
I agree.
Totally.
I think it's important.
It is.
It's foundational. It's necessary. You're not going to make it without it. But after you kind of get up off your knees and you have the prayer time together, you guys also suggest that it's imperative for spouses to always encourage one another, right?
Definitely. Yeah, that's it. Talking about on the way to having a complete marriage, to having a 7-ring marriage, you got to be encouraging. That includes not just the words that we say, but the way we look and the different things like that. There's a point in marriage where you realize that it's not about you and that you are really other focused. And that means other focus, meaning you're focused on your spouse. And that can directly relate to how well your marriage is going. The more self-focused you are, the more struggles you're going to have with your marriage. But the more other person focused you are, then the better things are going to be. And that goes with the encouraging. What is your wife's love language? What is your husband's love language? Speak their love language and really focus on meeting their needs, even when it comes at the expense of your needs.
Can you tell our audience more about your website, JackieBledsoe.com, and how people can stay connected with you on the web?
Definitely. Go check it out, JackieBledsoe.com. I write about helping men to lead and love their families. So that was something that I struggled with, and I felt that I was not that good at, so I wanted to be better, and I knew there were other men, so I started writing about that. So you can go check it out there, and I'm actually setting up some great freebies for your listeners. They just go to JackieBledsoe.com/his and her money. So I have some good stuff on there for them. We've got a date night resource called Date Night in a Box. You can also sign up to get more information about the 7 rings of marriage and get a free infographic that breaks them down. And also, we are, as part of the 7 rings of marriage, we're doing a web show, and we've already recorded several episodes, but we're doing basically what we're doing right now. We're sitting down, we're going through the 7 rings of marriage in relation to their marriage story of other couples and pulling out the truths in that, pulling out the things that are consistent and constant through marriages that get to that point. So check it out. Definitely jump on there and get your freebies at JackieBledsoe.com/his and her money.
Awesome. I'm about to go there right now and get me a date night in a box. I need me a date night in a box. Are you guys on social media?
We are. On Twitter, I am at J Bledsoe Jr. So that's just my first initial last name and my suffix, JR. And on Facebook, you can just search for Jackie Bledsoe Jr. So I'm a junior, so it's kind of written out on my social media. Stefana is at Stefana Bledsoe, and that's STEPHANA Bledsoe. You can also find me on the same place as Instagram. You can find us all over the web. But the best place is just go to the website and you'll get all the links there too.
Outstanding. We've been talking with Jackie and Stefana Bledsoe from JackieBledsoe.com.
Thanks, guys, so much for being on the show. It's been great.
Thanks for having us.
There you have it, the 7 rings of marriage.
That was so wow. When they were, going through the steps and talking about each ring of marriage, I was like, that is so true.
It makes complete sense.
Right. Our marriage actually went through a lot of those processes, a lot of those rings.
Yeah. Well, that's what every marriage goes through, hopefully. But the problem is some of us, we get stuck. We get stuck with the wrong idea of what marriage actually is. And we give up on the journey before we make it to the promised land, the prospering and the mentoring, And so I'm just really encouraged by how they broke it down. And it's really eye-opening because that's what marriage is. It's a journey, and it's a journey worth taking. It's a journey worth fighting for and fighting through. Marriage is a union of 2 imperfect people coming together to make each other better.
It was great. It was great. So definitely, you guys definitely want to check out our show notes to get the information on their website, and go check out all the information over there on JackieBledsoe.com.
Well, that does it for this episode of the His and Her Money Show.
Don't forget to visit us over at our website at hisandhermoney.com.
Catch us on Instagram at His and Her Money. Here it is. No matter where you are on the road to financial freedom, the key is to start now
and finish strong.
Thanks for tuning in to the His and Her Money Show. For more information on how to win with your finances, be sure to visit www.hisandhermoney.com.